So the first question I have, and this is not rhetorical, so I know you're eating, but I'm going to ask for a show of hands. When you go to work, it's a new quarter, you're getting ready to prepare your quarterly filing. How many of you go to work excited that you have to work in XBRL? Show me by show of hands. All right, we've got 1, 2. And that is typically the case. Now the second question is, you work hard on this, it's disrupted your life, your work life, your bosses tend not to know what you're doing. I hear that occasionally. But you've got to be wondering who is using XBRL. So how many think that it's really not being used at this point? Show of hands. All right, how many think it's kind of being used? All right. And how many of you would wish it would just go away? All right, well, let me say it's not going away. And in fact, what's occurred in the last 9 months especially is very clear signs that XBRL is being used and being used in a more profound way than you would imagine. Mike Willis, former Pricewaterhouse partner, came to the SEC about 9 months ago. And as he said, going into the commission, he thought they were rarely using it. And his exact quote in a public presentation was that he was stunned by how it was being used. Now, since that time, there are 2 major events that have occurred. And that's that the SEC contracted with outside providers, CalcBench, an XBRL data consumption company, and Audacity. We're going to hear from Christine about what Audacity brings to this program. And now that the SEC has tools where they're consuming the data, they're even using it more. Now, the reason they're using it more is they're getting real benefits from it. And I'm not going to steal Christine's thunder. I just wanted to show you this chart, which was prepared by Audacity, was something that an outside analyst asked Audacity to provide them with information that would typically take 5 to 6 to 7 days to prepare. And Audacity was able to pull it out after setting the system up within a few seconds. With the gains the SEC is achieving through XBRL, and this is what I'm sure you're all wanting to hear, is they're looking to expand structured data and XBRL. And they're turning over every stone to see where they can apply structured data, and that includes extensible markup language, XML, and some of the filings that are done in XML that you might not be aware of are the Forms 3, 4, and 5, the Form Ds. There's a new Reg A form, and there's XML built into that add the similar capability that XBRL is adding in terms of structured data. Within the last 18 months, the SEC's put in 10 new requirements. And for your lawyers at your companies, you can go back if they don't already know. There are 2 requirements for the proxy statement that are on the shelf ready to be put through at some time that have an XBRL requirement. And according to the people we talk to at the SEC, just expect more. How many like that idea? No. Now, with the usage of XBRL on the rise, there's more attention on quality. And as Mike Willis stated in an interview with our publication Dimensions, you actually have it in your folder. He said, with the increased use of XBRL data comes an increased awareness of XBRL errors. And the SEC has been broadcasting since the inception of XBRL that they're hoping the market, the filers, take more care in their production of XBRL so that they can use it, and to the extent they're not, it's inhibiting its use and expansion. Now here's something Christine might show, but this is an example of the value of XBRL in action and also some of the challenges. This is a small set of companies, unremitted foreign earnings. Big topic in this election year, companies parking their earnings overseas. And you see and the first trend you see is it's increasing. And this is an instant visualization you get from the XBureau data. But you see an anomaly. And in this case, the anomaly is General Electric, where in 2011, they show $104 billion of unremitted earnings. And then all of a sudden, down in 2012 on, they show $104 million. Now, I'm an analyst at the SEC. I look at this and I say, did GE just divest all its foreign assets and they no longer sell overseas? Is GE hiding something? Or in this case, it was GE just made a gross error in XBureau. And it's that kind of error that's creating more and more frustration at the commission. Mike tells a story. When he got to the commission, one of the first things happened, a senior official says, I want a data set, can you pull it from XBureau on, and he never disclosed what he was looking at. But he got a data set, gave it to the official. He said, in 5 minutes, I got a call back. And that official said, Mike, this information is all wrong. And Mike's response, well, it came from the XBureau filing. And the official said, if that's the case, we have to do something about it. Now, the SEC has given kind of a slap on the wrist over the last couple of years. Their first efforts were publicize the problems that are occurring and hope the filers will pay attention and do a better job. FASB and the SEC are issuing FAQs and guidelines on what to do. There's been a Dear CFO letter Lou will talk about. But what we've heard differently in the last couple of months is the SEC is actually picking up the phone and calling companies who have had some big problems in their filings. And according to the people we talk to, expect more aggressive actions. And I'm not going to, overstate this. We don't know if they're issuing direct comment letters. I was talking to someone earlier and looking at the comment letters. There's been no real comment letter on quality. It's been on the lack of fulfilling your requirement. But we do know the frustration's there. The other thing you should know is XBureau is starting to seep into the market. If you think about what the market data consumption from the SEC database is today, it's a whole bunch of data aggregators that scrub the EDGAR filings and throw it overseas, and they throw it back, and then that information is further refined either at the news service or at the analysts. And that's how the filings generally go. It's a very laborious manual process. What's occurred and is occurring is there's a new pipe going into the SEC database that's extracting the XBureau filings. And what's occurring with that is news services are commissioning some of these aggregators or toying with it themselves and getting real results that then show up as graphs or analytical data that come from XBureau. What I hear all the time when I'm talking to companies is they say, well, my CFO complains about how much time I spend on XBureau or how much of a pain it is. And they'll say, I asked our investor relations person, have you ever had a call about our XBureau file? And of course, the investor relations analyst says no. And so the conclusion is no one's using XBureau. Well, it's not going to work that way. It's this underground pipeline of information that's beginning to morph from EDGAR as it did from paper. I'm old enough to remember paper days, and I don't know how many people here have, but paper, there's a whole plumbing system to pull that data in, move to EDGAR, and now you have that relatively slow but beginning trickle of information coming through that XBureau pipeline. I mentioned the SEC has been publicizing their issues. This is Lou will be talking about, but the whole issue of values being entered improperly or structuring problems, this is what the SEC has been publicizing. In this 2011 report, they've said is still the most telling report because the same errors are occurring today that occurred back then. Now, a couple of things. Why has the SEC been somewhat of a laissez-faire, taking a laissez-faire approach? Well, they thought that if they just made XBureau carry the same weight of liability as your EDGAR file, That should get everyone's attention. So realize this still hangs over your head. If your XBRL file tells a different story than Edgar, you have a liability risk. But there's also reputational risk. I mentioned the GE file. And the only reason I really talk about it is because it did get publicized. But in this case, in India, an XBRL data aggregator published, as they publish a lot of information they get from XBRL and then circulate it through US agencies and foreign agencies and other people who ask them for it. They identified that in the General Electric 10K filing, there was this $100 billion mistake. Now, we all know General Electric has a lot of people working in India. What's GE's reputation? Six Sigma, continuous improvement, process improvement. That's what they live by. And yet, if I'm working at General Electric and I wake up in the morning and I see a publication say they just had a $100 billion error in my file, no one's going to get sued. It's not going to be the end of the world, but it's just not a good. No one wants their company to be presented in that light. Now, lastly, to underscore that we're not talking about a flash in the pan phenomenon. Kara Stein is a SEC commissioner and spoke in Denver recently and talked about having a revolution, a digital revolution. Now, she was referencing the SEC concept release. Is everyone familiar with that? It came out about 6 weeks ago, 340 pages of the most fascinating reading you would ever have. But in it, she says, she emphasized the power of machine-readable data, the power of structured data and what it means for our ability as a commission and other stakeholders to work with that data. And so she poses the question, well, what does financial disclosure look like in the future? And she says, well, technology opens up new possibilities for innovative visual display. Can a company tell its story best with a graph or a video? Can graphics design help investors navigate and understand information, layered information? And then she goes on and says, well, maybe the first thing we see is a company dashboard, we flip the dashboard, and then we see financial statements underneath it. Now, this is not a futuristic, pie-in-the-sky idea, something that's going to be way down there. I'm going to introduce Christine Tan, who's going to show you that as her software is being contracted by the SEC and licensed, this is today what's available at the SEC, and for those who are interested, it's also available for sale. This is a CPE credit program, but I just want you to know, do talk to Christine if you find the things she's talking about could help your company crunch masses of data that you do and your people do regularly. So with that, I want to turn to Christine, and we'll see what the SEC and the market can gain in value with XBRL. Thank you.